No, we'll just write it.
The big one. I can finish it.
Alright, are we all good? Welcome everyone to the semi-finals of HEP-IPTS 2017. We congratulate all teams for making it thus far. On-site development, we have EUA. On-site opposition, we have Pillars 2. Before we move on, what was your veto?
Oh, second. Wait, let me check.
Right?
Third one.
Third one, and then, so which one are we debating?
Second, immoral.
So you veto the first one. Alright.
Yes, okay.
Alright, so the motion reads, this house believes that it is immoral to bring a child into this world. There's no audience, but yeah, okay, so, alright, so without further ado, I call on PM to get this debate. Here.
Right. Before I move on with my debate, I'd like to clarify one thing with us. This debate is not a debate about stopping parents from having a child though. This debate is a debate on whether having a child is morally right or wrong. That is what this debate is going to be focused about. Now, I'm getting into my arguments. I have two layers of arguments. One is the morality of the morality. The second is how does the world looks like now and why we should improve it. Okay. On morality, what is morality? Morality on our side is the definition of being selfless, of doing something for the greater good instead of selfish reasons. It means helping others as opposed to caring for your own, which in this case is a family, and having your own child. That means that's it. Like I'll give you examples of people that they are morally right. Doctors Without Borders, they sacrifice themselves and go. They sacrifice their wealth that they can accumulate and go around healing people and things like that. And even though if it's not from a even though it's not from a selfless standpoint, we think it's still a generally good because it contributes towards a society, and you help them come back into terms and become heal them. And I give you an example of being morally good is like, for example, the Indian, I can't remember his name, the Indian guy in America, entrepreneur. He creates an energy drink. I can't remember the brand. However, he donates 90% of all his income to the people, and we think this is a morally good thing because he doesn't need that income. He doesn't need to provide for his own kids. So that's why I think that using this money is supposed to provide it to the people and help the people for the greater good. Okay, before I move on, yes.
So if the parents of this Indian entrepreneur decided that that choice was immoral, would he have the capacity to improve the world the way he has as we see today?
He does have the capacity to improve the world that he has today because he doesn't need to provide for his own for selfish reasons. He doesn't need to accumulate the wealth that he currently has to provide for this thing, but he can use this current wealth to improve the world and to help other people that are currently suffering in the world, which is what we are trying to achieve. Now, okay. Now, we think that having a child is a very selfish reason. Why is having a child selfish? Now, people bring children into the world for extremely selfish reasons. For example, having a complete family or having a legacy to leave behind, or just the idea of I want a child of my own for people to see. That is like a very selfish reason, and it's not for because of the child. And we'll argue that even if the child, and they will cater for the child, they give the child the best hospitality, they give the child the best education, and the child will be living in comfort. Even if the child will have a good life, this is a selfish reason because this comes at the expense of other people that are already currently suffering in the world, and which we think that we should deal with because those problems are what is important. Okay, yes.
How does the suffering of people today tie down to one parent's decision to bring a child to the world?
Okay, I'll get into that in my second point of argument. Now, continuing the argument of morality, this propagates the idea of selfishness and capitalism, like a selfish society of capitalism, because the idea that we need to hoard all our wealth for the people, for our future self, for our own. It's all for us, for me, not for other people. Like we think that if you are living a comfortable life, you can use these resources to help out other people, which we think is a morally right thing to do. Now, moving on to my second argument on how the world looks like now. There are a lot of people suffering right now because they are in orphanage, because they are unwanted babies, a byproduct of two lovers that don't love each another anymore. Those are the things that we think that are things that we need to deal with right now because they are happening now instead of thinking about the future on how I should provide for my own in the future. And then another thing I would like to clarify on is the condition of Earth, what the condition looks like now currently. We all know that the Earth is dying. Global warming is a problem. There's a scarcity of resources. There are 7 billion people on the Earth, and then if you want to bring in more, we think that this will already stretch the resources. There's already very much thinner, and then it will make the life of other people in the future much harder than they are right now. Okay, so the idea of wanting their own child leads to not helping people, which leads to more of this problem happening. This is how it goes. Now, having the ability to care for a child, no, thank you. Having an ability to care for a child, we think that you do not, that means that you have the ability to care for a child. You can adopt a child from an orphanage. You don't have to create a child of your own or having your own child because those people in the orphanage and those or homeless people, homeless children are suffering right now. And then even if you have the ability to care for a children, you should care for these people who are suffering right now. Because if you have a child of your own, it will become at the cost of these people continuing suffering and nobody reaching out a helping hand to help them. Now, continuing with this train of thoughts, because people will want to propagate their own self in selfish reason to provide capitalism, this will push towards a lot of young people that are getting unemployed because more and more people want to amass a huge sum of money for themselves. When young people are unemployed, they'll start getting violent. They'll lead into terrorism because they do not have the things that they need now. So they will act out in rage with violence to procure for the things that they currently need, and because they are idle, they have nothing else to do. Now, to conclude what we want to do, that we think is important for people to prioritize to help the world right now as opposed to helping yourself in the future? Because why are you accumulating such a big wealth for when you just want to forward selfish means? I mean, like, you should use this wealth that you currently have to help whoever is currently suffering right now. And then if you do help, this leads to like people helping out. Like, for example, Syrian refugee, Rohingyan refugees, they are people that in need of this help, and because you are selfish and you do not want to share the wealth that you have accumulated, we think that it's morally wrong to continue having a child, and that we should use this sum of wealth that you have accumulated through time, and then to give it to the people who are currently suffering. If that helps propose.
I thank the speaker. We now have your presentation.
If the world is truly horrible, why do so many people believe that children are the ultimate source of bliss? Few things to clarify. Firstly, our position. So many parents think that happiness comes from the child, and that is the ultimate form of happiness, and the choice to bring the child into the world is a moral one. So what are the metrics by which we measure this debate? One, on whether the choice of bringing the child into the world is moral. Two, we're going to prove to you the realities for that child that is brought into the world, and the crucial role that the child plays into shaping how the world is like. Two things in my speech today. One, I'm going to tell you why the decision-making process of bringing a child into the world is a moral one. Secondly, how the world gets better through each generation. But first, some rebuttals. So I find it rather funny that this guy said, oh, there are so many benevolent people, and then he attempted to bring an example of benevolent person, e.g. that person that donates 90% of their income because they don't need the rest of it. But then when they tried to bring in selfish people, they didn't even try to bring out an example of a selfish person. I find it rather disingenuous, because if it is so easy to name a benevolent person, I don't see how the harms of the selfish people that they cannot name are more significant than the benevolent people. So so the decision-making process, here's the thing. They try to contend that accidental births happen and non-intentional births happen. Insemination might be unintentional, but the decision to keep the child is ultimately of the parents. And because the parents' time and resources are put into the child, that is why the parents should own the decision whether or not to bring the child into the world. Also, the whole point of violent terrorism, two responses. One, I think it's a huge leap. Secondly, I'll deal with that later in my substantive. The decision-making process of bringing a child into the world is a moral one. So when people decide to bring a child into the world, it's mostly oftentimes when they've made the decisions and calculations whether or not they're able to sustain their child and themselves. So they weigh out the consequences of bringing a child into the world. They think about the opportunity cost, what it will cost them to have a child, how they will live the next few decades of their life if they did not have the child. So it's likely that these parents are then also emotionally committed to the child when the child is born, and even before the child is born, because when a mother goes through pregnancy, oftentimes they already start developing emotional connections to the fetus inside of them. So most parents are able to decide whether or not they want to bring the child into the world, and oftentimes they are also committed to the well-being of the children. How is this illustrated? For the more privileged people, oftentimes you see corporate leaders inheriting the companies and the assets and the fortune from their parents. An example of this would be JY Park of Samsung, the children of Robert Kwok. But even for poorer individuals, oftentimes you hear stories about African American mothers who are single, who hold 3 jobs to support their children. What does this mean? It means that parents are selfless towards their own children, because the most important stakeholder in this debate is the child that we are bringing into this world. Because the love is not only ingrained culturally, it's also a sincere and biological one that they have to deal with. No. So most children live the best lives that their parents can provide. And it is only because we bring people into this world that the benevolent actors that was brought up by the Prime Minister do come into existence. Without bringing a child into this world, I don't see how those benevolent actors that will give 90% of their income away to poor people in the world would exist. So the time, and also on the ownership of that decision. So a child is a manifestation of the love of the parents that ultimately belongs to the parents. What does this mean? The time, effort, and resources that goes into making that child are from the parents. The parents deal with the consequences, they deal with the process in which they get involved into making the child. They also mold the future and the likely consequences of that child. Therefore, the right to bring that child into the world is theirs. Because the comparative then becomes what the society dictate and what the parents dictate. Because society doesn't have as important of a stake in the child's life as do the parents. So the conclusion is that the ownership and the decision of whether to bring a child into this world ultimately belongs to the parents, because all the costs are borne by the parents. Any POIs?
So at best, all these reasons you've given fit into the narrative that buy into the ideology of the happiness to be able to make those choices, which itself is selfish. Can you tell us why this fits into the idea of narrative of morality, when morality tells you you have to be selfless to help the people around you, not just your own?
Sure. I think if the contention is that the world is evil, the status quo already shows improvements of the world. So they will likely contend that you will see dictators rising, dictators consolidating powers, and poor people all around the world. But the only reason why these things are more prominent now is because with the development of technology and the development of society, these things are more visible. It doesn't mean that they're getting worse, but by virtue of these things becoming more visible and us as a global society being more able to call these things out, we are better able to address those issues. They need to contend with the fact that with the development of society as a whole, we are better able to come up with methods to deal with, say, the poverty that these people have in the world, the dictatorships. Because oftentimes, the reason why we have the UN, the reason why we have charitable foundations that give billions to the poorest of people is because we have selfless people that the Prime Minister wanted to bring up in this speech. So, for example, the Bill Gates Foundation, all the foundations set up by these billionaires, they go towards helping the poor. They help the poor get education. They help the poor in terms of social needs, welfare, education, healthcare. If they want to talk about how horrible governments are, in the status quo, we already see some developments. Whenever a dictatorial government does something abhorrent, the global community then comes together and say that, hey, we abhor these horrible dictators for governing these people as if you are God and making your decisions for them. That's why whenever Kim Jong-un acts up, the world, the US, and the allies of the US and the UN actively condemn Kim Jong-un. Whenever there's poverty in the world or there's disease in the world, the US, the UN, and all the benevolent actors that was also brought up in Prime Minister's speech, they come together and act. If they want to say that things are getting worse simply because we see things in the media more, it's simply because it is easy to call these things out with the advent of technology and it's more visible. Thank you. How exactly is God going to win this debate? We're going to show that there are other things that you can do, and those things are better than bringing a child into this world. Then we'll show that the process of bringing a child into this world comes at the cost of you doing all those other things. That definitely means that it's immoral to do. An example of this would be, the train coming on the track, and then I have a family member on one side, and a lot of people on the other side. I'm usually more inclined to help my family member as opposed to every other person. It comes at the cost of me helping all of those people and that's what we think is an immoral choice in itself. I'll be doing these two things within 2 ways. Firstly, I'll tell you why having a child is inherently immoral. Secondly, I'll tell you why even having a child is bad for that child in itself. Firstly, why having a child is inherently immoral. I think what we need to point out at this point in this debate is that there are more important considerations than just things that parents usually consider when having a child. Things such as legacy, things such as how happy you would be if you have a child. It's not just the case that you're going to have people who want to have children for this optimal moral reason, because that doesn't exist. There's no philosophizer in the bed, right? I think what happens usually is that many people make decisions just simply based on those selfish incentives of legacy and happiness. What are the other considerations we talked about in this debate? You have a large chunk of orphanage homes within this world where you literally have children that are in there. I think all of those children have a stronger moral claim to care than someone who doesn't exist to begin with. I think it's better for us to give that moral claim, and we therefore owe them a moral obligation to actually lend our care to those people, as opposed to giving it to someone, bringing a new person into this world to lend that care to that person. The way in which you know this is behind the veil of ignorance, i.e., if we didn't know if we're going to be orphans or not, we are always going to be inclined for us to actually do this in status quo. That is to say, if you were to pop up in some conceivable world as an orphan, you would prefer a world in which parents actually took these orphans and actually gave them the care of a parent. They might say, but maybe parents should just give funding to these people who are within the orphanage homes. What I think is important is we need to lend the maximum level of care to those, to the least within society, because if we could not tell whether we would be those people, we would want that same care. I think that is the most fair way in which actually taking care of these people. But secondly, there are literally other people suffering in this world that we need to take care of. The idea that we should bring in a new person and then lend all our resources to that person just doesn't make sense. That's why the argument we brought in from PM is important, because we told you that the idea that you should have a child in itself promotes selfishness, that you only need to take care of your own. I think that that's something that is bad, because you want to maintain your family unit, your legacy, your happiness, and all those sort of things. I think being able to invest resources into other channels as opposed to just your own is something I would think is important. What is important here is that having that child comes at the cost of you doing all those other things. Because even if you're still going to be a philanthropist who has a child, you're still channeling some other resources into that child. At the point in which that child doesn't already exist, I think all of your resources and the maximum extent of your care has to be lended to people who already exist in this world. The very fact that there are people who are suffering and literally in the streets begging means that you owe a greater responsibility to already existing humans, as opposed to creating a new human into this world and then letting your care to that human. That's why the arguments that we got from this side about how parents are selfless to their children just doesn't make sense, because we admit that it's a fact, parents are selfless to their children, but that is the exact problem that we point out in this debate, that they also need to be selfless to other people, but that comes directly at the cost of doing so, and we think that that's something that is important, as opposed to channeling resources to these people. So you spend money on diapers, spend money on primary education, secondary education, university education, and giving them the best care that you want on this side, while someone is starving and doesn't have food within maybe Africa, right? So you don't have resources. I'm just making a racist joke, right? So you don't have resources to those people, and that's something that we think is bad. Secondly, why it's bad for this child in itself. The one thing they wanted to hang their hats on in this debate. What I think is actually sure, just go.
Yeah, you have to prove to us that it's in their interest and responsibility to be directly affiliated to the outcomes of everyone else in the world who they never chose of their place in the world.
Cool. I don't have to prove to you that it's in their interest to take care of these people. I have to prove to you that it's their responsibility and obligation to take care of these people. That means there are many things that are moral, but I don't necessarily have the interest to do or incentive to do, but I nonetheless have an obligation to do it, and it would be immoral for me not to do it in that sense. I don't need to prove incentive, I just need to prove a moral obligation on that. The second argument on why we think this is bad for this child, I think what is important to note is that the world is literally not a nice place, right? The characterization that, this world is really nice and we should just bring a child into this world just doesn't make sense, right? You have things such as, we have an all-time high population in this world. You have environmental damage and climate change that is literally threatening the vast majority of people. High health epidemics in the vast majority of the world. Wars, refugees, things such as discrimination and disenfranchisement that most people are likely to face in this world. The importance of this argument, right, isn't just to stack up whether the world is good or bad on both sides. What I think is important to do is to show that for the vast majority of people, it's a coin flip as to whether you're going to fall on the good side or on the wrong side of this world. That means the bar to which you need to
to justify this parental happiness and parental love is higher than what they think it is. Because on your side is a world in which a parent is literally having that coin flip for a child and at the cost of simply wanting to gain that happiness. That's why the characterization that most parents usually think so much as to whether they'll be able to take care of this child isn't exactly true. If that were to be the case, most parents won't actually give birth in this world. Because for the vast majority of people, it's a risk they're taking as to whether they're going to be able to take care of this child. That's why we often spend large resources promoting things such as family planning, because we recognize that that's a problem that most parents actually suffer from, that they just give birth to a child because of that selfish incentive, or in many cases because they feel like communal obligations means that your community forces you to have a child, or many parents wanting to just say, I'll take the risk anyways and see if I'm actually going to be able to take care of this child. That means on your side, to a large scale, you're going to actually have many people who are actually suffering on your side of the house. You need to justify why that high probability of suffering is justified simply for the sake of parents gaining some level of happiness in itself. I think what is important to note in this debate is that you're definitely going to have to explain to me why the choice of you actually getting a new person who doesn't already exist in this world, and that moral attachment is more important than the moral attachment of people who already exist now. Given the fact that humans who already exist now are people that we need to lend our help to. That child that might exist in the future doesn't exist at all. We all know obligations to that child. The higher obligations we have are to the people who actually exist right now and right here. I think that that's where your moral obligation lies. Therefore, it's definitely immoral for you to bring a new child into this world. Should be proud of.
Okay, speaker, we now have Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here.
I hope I fit the next week. If not, it's okay. You will just hear me. In his final speech as the 44th US President, Barack Obama said that everything we do in this world is to leave the world a better place for our children. The instinct and the core belief of humanity may come from the love that we share with everyone else, but if it does not come with accepting some form of selfishness to care for the ones that we love the most first, there will never be a sequence for you to care for the ones around the world. Eric did not prove the link and tried to push the burden onto us to try and prove that you need to prioritize helping everyone else over those of your own. And this I will do in two questions. Firstly, is morality purely utilitarian? And secondly, is the choice of bringing a child to this world a selfish one, but inherently? I'll have two arguments to follow up this with. What is the life of a child in the world of today, and what will the world look like when they will shape? And secondly, will this world have more reasons to be horrible, or will it have better reasons to improve if we brought children into this world? So to the first issue, is it purely utilitarian? The first thing you wanted to contend here is that there's a trolley problem. And this is largely the principle coming from government. The reason why this principle is flawed is because if you want to care only for people you have no form of attachment to besides just that common humanity, then you first have to tell me why there is an inherent belief within me that I can make a connection with that person in order to give them the amount of love that I would necessarily give to the child that I bring into this world, and I'll invest as much as possible to these individuals, if not more, given the magnitude of suffering these individuals have, in order for them to actually benefit from the change that they have, right? But they also didn't prove that these individuals have provided some kind of incentive for us to do good for these individuals, because at the core of morality is an understanding that the human person does have to accept some selfishness within these individuals, because it is inherent to us that the love that we have is given to people we feel most connected to, and it is also given to making sure that the lives that we live are the best versions of our own. And if we do not accept that selfishness is justified in the way you treat yourself and you treat other people, then you can never get all the benefits that you want on that side. But to the second issue, is this choice a selfish one? The first thing they had to prove was why these individuals had an interest, firstly, to invest as much as they claim these people should invest in terms of a responsibility to these individuals. Why should it be my responsibility to help everyone else in this world if I do not first establish an interest within me that only then I can have that interest, only then I can make that responsibility happen. But how does that happen on our side? Because understand, if the child you bring into this world comes from a decision-making process that this child not only is a source of happiness for yourself, but one that can go on to contribute into the world. That's why we invest so much in our own children, to make sure they get good education, to make sure that they are employed, because of the effects and the role of contribution that these children can go on to play later on. So how does this then mean that parents can help, or individuals are more likely to help other people? If we use the example of the adoption case, why would individuals who have been told that it is immoral to bring children to world suddenly now have an incentive? Not first established that there was an inherent need to love and care for the individuals that you bring into your own one, into the world on your own first. Because only if you do that, given the interaction you have with the child growing up in your life, the fact that you invest so much in them, that's when people see that that source of happiness can possibly be transferred into other individuals. So you have to make the trade-off that these parents may have their own children, and that means that they are less likely to adopt as many children in our world. But when they do, we can get there is a greater premium to making sure that that parent invests more in bringing up the child, giving that care and love that this individual necessarily needs. Because on their side, it seems to be sufficient that all you have to do is take 10 people into your house, give them enough food, put them through school, and not need to form the initial connection with other individuals. It's the same thing when it comes to the people we interact with in the world, right? We don't necessarily feel an immediate connection to other individuals, and until we do, we won't necessarily see a need to help other individuals as well, right? But finally, if they say that there's a risk on our side, it's a gamble when you bring the children into this world, there's also an equal amount of risk on their side when you take in individuals to care for yourself, and you take on the larger burden on your side to care for all the suffering that you have in your side. Because if they said that it's selfish for you to be a parent, you shouldn't bring a child into this world, then that same principle must be applied to the way in which they treat these other individuals. So they're less likely to adopt people in their world as compared to on our side, where the interaction of the people the interaction that you have with your child gives you more of a reason to replicate that same interaction with other individuals in our world. Yes, sorry.
Right, so that's why PM started off with a clarification. If this debate was about telling parents not to bring a child or stopping parents not to bring a child, then we definitely need to prove an interest for them to take care of other people. But this debate is about whether having a child is moral or not. Even though they don't have the interest, I think it's moral still. Tell us why it's not.
We think that we are supposed to prove that it is moral to bring a child into this world. We're supposed to prove why it's immoral, and then transfer that resourcefulness that you have onto wanting to adopt other individuals in your world, right? But to the argument, why is the life of a child in our world what is that process like for that child? So the first question that we have to ask, and this is, what is the growth of that child from childhood to adulthood? Understand that the vast majority of parents may have different amount of resources that they cater to their child. The metric of parenting here is that you only need to raise you only need to be sufficient enough to raise the child on your own, right? But that sufficiency changes in their world, because now the premium of parenting is raised so much, given that they seem to be such an immoral act on their side, that they now have to shift up the burden and say, oh, if you want to raise up a child now, you have to be a perfect parent, because any source of unhappiness that a person may live in your world is the reason why you shouldn't be caring for that child to begin with, right? And that's why we contend in the second reason, that the world will be a lot more horrible on their side, because what is the incentive for you to care for people on your side, given that you do not prove the connection or the willingness for you to make a connection with these individuals? There's a greater reason for you to accept the fact that this world is just horrible and we suffer, and there's no reason for us to improve it. The investment we put in our own children, in the example that we use, the entrepreneur on their side, when parents do these things and create children, they are able to replicate the goodness or willingness to help other individuals because they've seen that within their own families itself. It's less likely to happen when you bring in other individuals into that, when you adopt just other individuals, because the fact that there's a lack of biological connection with these individuals means there's less likelihood for you to transfer that same kind of love and emotional connection to these individuals. And at that point, the lives of these individuals are going to be far more worse, because they don't get to experience the things you wanted to guarantee them to experience to begin with. So then there's a lower incentive for you to want to improve the conditions of this world, because you just continuously accept the premise that there will always be suffering and there's no reason for us to improve the world. Because when you bring in children on your own, that's when you see that the investment I put in my children must equate into them being able to either improve the world and make sure I can do these individuals are far more better. In conclusion, we not only have better adoption and better dealing with the suffering of the world, but we also make sure that the people who bring into this world play a bigger role in achieving that as well.
Thanks for your speech.
To start my speech with Eric's POI, if this debate is about stopping people from having children, then that's when we probably will be forced to prove the intent on why that probably beneficially translate into people having the interest of making these changes, right? But with this incentive of not, right, it does not change the idea on whether or not as individuals and members of the society, we have a moral duty or a moral responsibility to heal the world like we want to bring to you from Cycle. With that in mind, two things I will be talking about in my speech. Firstly, whether or not, or like what morality exactly is and the metrics that constitute into what we consider to be moral acts or good deeds, and whether or not having a child fits into that metric. And secondly, on what having a child in this world exactly means, not just to that child, but to the world entirely. Okay, so moving on into the first point of extension. I think Ralph quite did a good job in defining what morality, what we consider morality, acts we consider moral in today's regard. Because we told you, right, before you could put an action into a consideration of morality, firstly, it has to be free from the interest or self-interest of that individual making the decision. But secondly, like even going beyond that, if you need a selfish incentive, right, to make those acts, right, but then the second analogy is like it has to be for a greater good, right? So meaning, if I make a selfish decision to go to probably study medicine, right, the moral part of that aspect is not the fact that I've made the choice to study medicine to feel good about myself, but what I'm able to do with that decision to study medicine, meaning I want to help others, like be healing others or healing like people, right? So we think that is the morality part of that ideology, right? So meaning, even if they want to buy into the ideology that the only thing that gives people interest is first, you believing that you have to have your own, and that's probably what transcends into like extension of love and all those things, right? Firstly, we think that is false because more often than not, people don't extend these things, right? Like we evidently see in society, where firstly, what people prioritize in status quo is that firstly, I need to take care of my own first before I move on into loving others. So even if you are to buy into the ideology that those laws sometimes extend, right, we think it never comes at the expense of you not prioritizing your own first, right? Meaning, even if you're that like selfless human that like being like Bill Gates that wants to help people, right, you still need to prioritize having an overwhelming lifestyle choice for your child, right? We think those overwhelming life choices that you're prioritizing your child on is one less selfless act that you can make on that side of the house. And this is the moral objective good we are defining for you in this side. So the mere fact that you have that option to enforce that ideology to like cater for my own first or cater for my own before I'm able to love another person is what rule out the option of people being completely or absolutely selfless. Right? But even if they say no, people won't entirely be selfless on our side of the house. At least we are able to deprive the option of limiting that ideology that, you know what, it has to be a family unit. If this is what could contribute to people not like forcing into accumulation of wealth because they don't have the choice or incentive of keeping it to their children, we don't think they will take it to their grave. So even if they die, we use it to other good child. But secondly, right, and then like because we keep hearing like here, if you have a child that this is a 1 in a million statistics, right? We don't have as much enough Bill Gates in the world, like even if we have probably 1 out of probably every hundreds of thousands of people, right? So we think the idea is this, right? this problem does exist because of the sole dominant narrative of the whole capitalistic structure, where people are greedily like accumulating or holding onto resources in order for them to like be able to ensure continuity in their family trend and stuff like that, right? Because when they tell me that I need to go and study, it's for my own good, right? What they say is, they didn't say it's for your own good to go and heal the world. No, it's for your own good to continue. Our legacy is what usually dominates those kind of narratives, right? Which is why it is often important, like this important, right? When parents tell their kids, like, you know what, this is what we want for you because this is what is good for us as members of the world, right? We think these are wrong narratives to be enforcing in society. Yeah.
Given that children provide a direct link to understanding vulnerability, wouldn't more people like Bill Gates be more likely to be moral, benevolent, and empathetic when their own children, when they experience firsthand what that vulnerability is like when they have their own children?
But the idea on your side of the house is like the vulnerability has to come from your own selfish reason, right? Because here is the idea, right? If you say like the only reason I'm able to have compassion for others is because I've been able to have be compassionate towards my own, also did not defeat the idea of what we have when it comes to problems in this world where people are forced into even having like discriminative issues are when it comes to society because of the feel and necessity to protect their own from the evil of like the others and stuff like that. We think these are all like atrocious acts that still exist on this side of the house when we continually prioritize those feelings. But what does it exactly mean for this child, right, or this baby, right? Because when you talk of like this decision, I think Eric already spoke to you guys a lot about this on this choice of the decision, right? So because we tell you like the word itself, like it's a risk, right? And it's probably like even if you can guarantee the quality of life of that child, right? It's all there's always the slight chance of the possibility of it like going wrong and along the way is something that's still up at optimally high at this point in time because of the aging what we have, or even the like scarcity of resources and stuff like that, right? So we tell you that at the journey itself, the kind of experience that child will have to undergo, it's something that itself it's painful in nature for that child, right? So these are form of like for some form of like moral or false consciousness that we often inherently buy into when we're making considerations to have a child, or that we don't necessarily put into it, because more often than not, we are often blinded by this ideology that love is enough to cater for all the necessities or to cater for all the good things that this child will have, without entirely looking into how this love translates into a better quality of life for this child. You may love a child, but that does not mean that child is happy to live in this shitty world we live in. Because if you want to say like dictatorship and things like that does end, things like epidemics or global warming are still things people will have to suffer from this world.
Thank you, speaker. Can we now have opposition? Thank you.
Morality is how you treat people best given the circumstance you're in, not one that forces you to be utilitarianism as misrepresented inside government. You must understand the differences here. It's very intuitive for them to come up with that version of pure utilitarianism at the expense of things like your incentives and the way you work and the way that people should operate hand in hand with morality. What am I going to talk about today? My first issue will be regarded about principles and what is moral, and I'll distinguish here why we uphold that better. And secondly, I'll tell you what the world will look like and conceptualize that to you when it leans to our side. I'll show you why they've been more selfish there, or they can't actualize it in their outcomes. But let's think about the technical side of debate. If you notice back to your notes, they were very parallel there with the comparatives, meaning that not a lot and not according to Jen. There was also not a lot of engagement against Dave's argumentation about how the world will become worse and when people decide to self-actualize and move away from your version of morality as a coping mechanism to not be called immoral. Meaning that generally when you don't bring a child into manifest your views into the world, you're more likely to not have a child and rather keep those resources to yourself where you can tangibly see the efforts go by. Meaning, that means more selfish intentions on that side as well. I'll go through it bit by bit in my principal argumentation. What is moral? So I don't think they've ever told us why channeling resources somewhere else besides directly to utilitarianism products was a bad thing. The trade-off is simple here that we've shown you from the get-go. Not all resources are maximally utilized, but morality is defined by the resources that you want to give it. This means that generally, whenever you do give a resource over, this means you actually appreciate it and that you actually believe that this will manifest into the goodness of the world through my child, which I have full belief in. If the concept of your world is right, that is immoral to give it to my child, but rather to any other organization, then if I lack the belief in it, therefore my morality isn't fully utilized in that expense. I think that they have failed to actually show you the comparison of why that's more preferable to less fulfilling morality compared to complete utilization on that side. Don't be misguided by the words coming out from them. I don't think that they are very moral, they're just very utilitarianistic. Let's move on to this idea of legacy. No thanks. Here, so if you transfer your goodwill and it trickles down, we haven't really got an answer over here to why that's particularly a bad thing. And you must note that this is a distinction to what defines who responds more in this particular issue as well. So we don't know why this is bad. But what does this mean in this debate? Therefore, many of people who are moral must find incentives to be moral if they were to act, want to act that way. The alternative is this, that they will avoid immorality in other ways. For example, right? So like Mark Zuckerberg, when he has his child and he really means the world and you get updates of it all the time on Facebook that you know his child and you know his wife Priscilla as well, right? The point is this, all these initiatives coming and leading up from that have resulted in the sense of, I want a world better for my son, therefore I'm going to channel it to other resources. These people must be able to manifest the idea of where my morality is going to lead to in order to have the purest morality possible from the individual. This is a distinction that was misrepresented by side government and was not engaged with to the best extent. Let's move on to what the world will look like from now on. Before that, sure.
If there's no idea of inheritance or a child inheriting my wealth, will people still have incentives to accumulate wealth when they know there's nobody to inherit it?
So yeah, of course, you inherit the wealth just so that you can spend on it, right?
Yeah.
So like, understand this, when we have money, right, and we want to maximize our economic power, what we do is we make ourselves happy with the money. If it makes you happy to invest it in a child and to see that child can make a difference because he's young, he's vibrant, he has ideas, the world is developed, too old for you to understand and connect to the world as you can compared to a child, then you might as well manifest it into the child if that is his happiness and his morality lies in that happiness. You haven't told me why blindly giving up to other people can lead to happiness in any way or morality. Because if you do that, this just means that you're unhappy and you're doing morality for the sake of everyone just blocking it down on you, and you will not have a fulfilling life in this world. Let's move on to what the world will look like. So should morality be dictated? And this is the premise question that must be answered to win this issue. If morality is dictated, then morality is not reflected well by people because there's no incentive or motivation. But how did this develop in this debate? People will likely hoard resources if they can't give it away to something that's personalized and one for them. Understand that this is a question that was not answered as well from them. The conclusion is simple. If the decider of being moral or immoral is based on this, then people who believe in the personalization will premise their actions away from what will deem them immoral. So I don't have to be a moral person, I just have to avoid being immoral, and therefore will do all the selfish things in your world and will not manifest any of those resources into the world as well. So I don't think that they actually have a better outcome compared to the accumulation of wealth that happens as a net in this world. But let's answer the second premise. Who has responsibility here? No thanks, it's okay. Who has responsibility? So they must prove that it's within individuals' responsibility to cater for other people around them. Why is this so? I think that this probably wasn't like taken down other than just a statement coming from extensively from Dave. What does this mean? This means that you must show a responsibility to the person directly affected by you in order to care for that person. Just for example, governments care for us, that's why they give us subsidies and welfares. Note that this explanation also is another reason why we can mitigate the harms that they talk about on their side if governments already support people who are handicapped, people who are minorities as well, and subsidies and stuff like that. Therefore, I don't see the incentive for individuals on the ground, normal people like you and me, to have a full responsibility or obligation to help the world become a better place. Understand, I don't think it's also very practical to do so, and they haven't really told us how it will materialize into the world. Why? Because if I'm reliable for the kid in, let's say, Myanmar, who's starving right now, and I don't have the capacity to channel it into the avenue that I want to, I will only give it freely. I don't think that's a good thing because you can't materialize it as well. Principal arguments are very important, and that's why we've taken that aspect. But as far as that goes, we must understand that in order to fully apply the effects of principal arguments, people must believe in themselves and be able to see what the results are. If not only for that, then they will be happy doing it, and we will have humanity restored in its place.
Yeah.
And then also from the speakers, can I now have opposition in back here?
At the end of this debate, the biggest question we're left with is, what will the world look like for the children that may not be ours, and what will it look like for the children that are ours, and what responsibilities we attach to the people that either have children and do not have children. Two questions to clear up the issues in this debate. Firstly, why is it true that not bringing children into this world turns us into fully selfish people and turns us into fully selfless people? And secondly, how do we make the world a better place? To the first issue, the largest characterization of morality that government did not want to compromise on is that morality is fully hinged on you being utilitarian. We accept that there are utilitarian decisions that people must make, but this must come first by acknowledging why people make their utilitarian decisions. It must also come with accepting some reality that our lives are inherently our own, and everything we do will be for the best version of our lives. The reason why we work so hard in order to raise enough money is because we want to be able to live fulfilling and happy lives. And this may come with the relationships that we form with other people, but also in the ones that we can create when we invest so much in bringing people into the world. So they must accept some reasonable expectation for people to be selfish in making the decisions that they want. Otherwise, you will not get the benefits of wanting to be utilitarian if you purely expect them to be robots and giving out their resources just for the benefit of other people. They never answered why this immediately drives utility, or why this necessarily means people do not keep their legacy to themselves and immediately want to give up to other people. That's why my group speakers specifically use the example of why Mark Zuckerberg is willing to donate so much into STEM research, because he's brought a person into this world and he's realized that this person will now be impacted by the reality of the world for the next 15, 20 years, for the next 40 years in her life. And that is a reason why I need to do more in order to leave the world a better place for my child. In that specific characterization, that's how a lot more people will live better lives. That's why there's a lot more donations going into making sure there are fewer refugees in the world, that their suffering are alleviated. The kind of progress that we've made in terms of reducing poverty levels today is because of our ability to empathize and see that people do deserve love as well. And that comes from us being able to manifest that interest to the people with closest to us in the interactions that we have on our side. So in conclusion, it is not immoral. It is moral for you to bring this child into the world. And even if it was a selfish decision, if you do not make the selfish decision, you will not have the utilitarian benefits that they claim to want to achieve. But to the second issue, how do we make the world a better place? The assumption on government is that if you do not bring children into this world, all your resources will immediately be transferred into other people, into the suffering of people that are so detached from your lives, because this means that there's some utilitarian that comes out of you. They never prove to us why the way in which people grow up and the conditioning that they have when they grow up. And the fact is, when you grow up in a family and you first experience what love means by the interaction of your own family members, that when you are able to replicate that, it is because you've experienced it in your own family. They never prove why this necessarily means you'll immediately transfer to other people had they not experienced it first on their own. But secondly, we also think that the interest, you must have interest in wanting to help the world before you can take responsibility and assume it. Because it's unfair for you to just say people owe responsibility to the world and they owe all their resources to the world without first saying that they need to have an interest in wanting to help the world to begin with. The reason why this interest is so important is because it's important for you to sustain the kind of actions that you want to have. Because if you don't have an emotional connection to the issues around the world, at any point you can opt out and not take responsibility over it. Because the reason why we continuously invest in our own children is because we could always see an interest in doing better for them, even though it doesn't necessarily benefit us to begin with. And this is a principle that children are able to carry on in their lives when they grow up, and that necessitates the kind of things we see in reality. That's why we have people like the white helmets trying to save children in Syria, because they know they don't want their brothers and sisters to be in similar situations. That's why they're going to go out and do all these things for other people. But in conclusion, what will the world look like for the people they expect to help the world? It will be unhappy for them because everything they worked for is simply just to give it up to other people. Other people they are unwilling to make a connection from. The comparison is these are the people that are going to keep things for themselves and hoard their own legacies because they don't see a reason to help others, given that they never experienced love or seen it in their own children to begin with.
Okay, speaker, we now have Dr. Dubai.
Two things in this reply speech. Firstly, I just want to engage with this awkward idea of interest and incentive of parents to act, and how even on those grounds we still win this debate. But secondly, I just want to reiterate the obligation, which is where this debate actually lies, that we brought to you on government side. So what we got from was that having a child would build an interest for you to help others, and that's a direct, because there's a direct link for you understanding the plight of many of these people. The first way in which we engage with this was to tell you that this is part of the false consciousness of not caring for other people that are not your own, that is already imbued by the idea of having a child and only taking care of that child. The idea of maintaining a family unit is what gives rise to all of those things on this side of the house. Secondly, we told you that improving the world for your child isn't necessarily improving the whole world as an entirety, right? That's why in most instances, more parents are likely to take care of their children in itself, as opposed to going all out to help other people within the world. That's why it was necessarily exclusive on this side of the house. I think that's something they never engaged with on this side, because note that they are literally defending the status quo in which people actually have children. I'm not sure where all these people are going about helping everyone in the world, right? I think at best they point to some anomalies like Bill Gates or some people who are actually helping out. I don't think it's widespread that everyone is helping out at all, right? Apart from just the reconciliation we've already brought to you on all, that we don't necessarily need to prove an interest at all. I think that these are added responses. But thirdly, we also told you that people suffering on the streets are also people that are able to buy your understanding. I don't know why you need to have a child to understand that you need to help other people. When you literally walk on the street and find people suffering and starving, that's already a reason for you to help other people in itself. I'm not sure where this argument is coming from at all. But fourthly, the life of that child notes is something that they're trading off on this side of the house, because they never responded directly to the argument of the fact that you're literally flipping a coin on every single child that comes into this world. That means even if we buy that you somehow are likely to gain an incentive to actually take care of other people by having a child, that child is very likely going to suffer in this world. I don't think they engage with that argument at all. I think that in no way are they winning even on this point of interest. But secondly, on this idea that we need to definitely prove that we have an interest for parents to take care of children or take care of people in the world on our side of the house, I think this debate is about a person who doesn't have a child. It's about where your moral obligations lie. Should it be in you getting a child out for all the reasons in which you want to get a child? The reasons such as legacy, reasons such as actually getting happiness from holding that cute little thing in your hands. I don't think there was sufficient reasons given on this side of the house why your moral obligations don't lie to the already existing children in this world that have no care and no parents at all, or to the vast majority of people that are suffering across the world, and why you definitely need to just have this child. I don't see how they are going to win even on that issue. We don't have to prove that all parents are going to definitely care about everything in the world. We just have to prove that it's immoral in itself. I think they didn't respond to the argument of obligation. They only responded by saying that it's hard. But the thing is, moral decisions are hard. But it doesn't mean that they are not moral at all. Sometimes killing someone is hard, but it just might be the moral decision to actually take someone's life, right? But I don't think you can just simply get away with this debate by saying that morality is hard, because that's just a fact of life. How exactly did we prove this obligation to you in this debate? They explained to you that we, behind the veil of ignorance, and notice that literally there was zero direct responses to any argument that we had on our side of the house. All we just heard was just this going back to how we didn't prove any utilitarian whatever that was being said on that side of the house. I think if you were to choose and you didn't know whether you were to be an orphanage in this world, you would want the best amount of care. You would want some parental care as opposed to having people train you just like teachers. I think that that's a better word for orphans in this debate, and that's something that's extremely important. The selfish reasons that you have on your side of the house are not what the trade-off of many of these people continually suffering. Our moral obligations definitely lie on the existing humans in this world, as opposed to us creating a new one and then having moral obligations to them. I'm proud to propose.
I thank both teams